Lost somewhere between the desert and the giant city of Cairo, a massive expanse of limestone of more than 300 hectares looks over the Nile Valley. This is the Giza Plateau. More than 4,000 years ago, our ancestors made use of all this raw material to build what can only be called architectural feats. 3 pyramids standing next to each other, one with the tomb of Khufu, his son's pyramid, Khafre, and his grandson's, Menkaure. And we shouldn't forget the Sphinx at the entrance of the plateau. The landscape looks like a postcard and is known the world over. Although Khufu is the most famous one, the pyramids of Khafre and Menkaure are but 100 meters away and also offer unrivaled levels of perfection. Yet no major scientific campaign has ever been carried out on these 2 monuments, despite the fact that many mysteries concerning them are left unsolved.
When I came to Giza Plateau, people said there is nothing can be discovered. I came in 1987. I made major discoveries. I'm saying all my life to everyone that we discovered until now 30% of the Egyptian monuments.
But today, the mystery surrounding these fascinating tombs could perhaps be solved. Indeed, a French team of engineers was given special authorization to carry out a digital scanning operation. With the help of drones and small cameras, they intend to take pictures of the Giza Plateau from every possible angle, and that technique is called photogrammetry. After several days in the field, hundreds of thousands of pictures are sent to Paris. Once put together, they'll bring life to 3D models of the pyramids and the Sphinx. Photogrammetry isn't new per se, but the latest evolutions of the technology now allow for an unprecedented level of accuracy.
These algorithms today let us analyze not just 2 or 3 images like they used to, but 1,000, 10,000, or even 100,000 images. We are able to reproduce landscapes of several square kilometers in 3D, monuments, sculptures, and we do so with all the tiny details of the architecture.
These photogrammetric data will perhaps help solve some of the secrets behind the building techniques.
We can gather information on how they were built through the study of the blocks, of their geometry. How were they carved, for instance? Or can we see some marks of the tools used?
It takes several weeks to compute such highly accurate models. Perhaps they'll help to shed some light on some of the mysteries behind these symbolic monuments, especially the Sphinx, one of Egypt's most famous and mysterious structures. Vasil Dobrev, a French Egyptologist, is leading us to this giant statue located below the pyramids, which has been protecting the entrance to the plateau for millennia.
When I stand in front of the Sphinx, I wonder, what can this be? It must be something so important that it has never been copied. Although Egyptians made smaller Sphinx, they never carved another one in a mountain like that. There are many mountains around here, small hills like that, but why didn't they carve another Sphinx?
Who is the guardian watching over the Giza Plateau? 4,000 years later, it's difficult to know what symbols are hidden behind this strange creature. But one thing's certain. Since it was built, it has continuously fascinated people and Egyptologists. Although for a very long time, the statue was almost entirely covered by the Egyptian sand.
In the late period, people like to come and touch it. People like to be buried beside it. And this is why the Sphinx became a legend to the ancient Egyptians.
During ancient Greece, people thought it was standing up, just like the Colossus of Rhodes. They thought it was a standing statue. The Sphinx was excavated for the last time during the 20s, and that's when we found out that it had a lion body. So it wasn't a normal being. It wasn't just another pharaoh.
The Sphinx is 73 meters long and 20 meters high, more than 25 times the size of a lion. The analysis of the stones it's made of led archaeologists to date its construction to approximately 2,500 BC, which matches the time the Giza pharaohs reigned. Therefore, it was probably built by the same men who created the pyramids. Yet to understand its peculiar shape, we have to focus on the building process, and archaeologist Mark Lehner believes the answers can be found in the field.
You know what strikes many people who visit the Sphinx for the first time is that it doesn't sit up on the plateau, it sits down low. And that's because it actually sits in a quarry. The ancient Egyptians created the Sphinx not by bringing stones and building it. They created the Sphinx by taking stone away, natural rock. Like Michelangelo had a big block and he carved David.
During the 19th century, the first archaeological excavations helped Egyptologists to understand how the statue was built. They discover that instead of bringing tons of stones, Egyptians from antiquity had the clever idea of carving the Sphinx directly in the quarry of the Giza plateau. And nothing went to waste. The blocks that were removed to build the Sphinx were used to build a temple right in front of the statue.
Most of the blocks have 3 geological layers. There's a hard layer above, and then there's a soft yellow layer. Yellow because it has more clay. And then there's another hard layer. We see these same 3 layers in the body of the Sphinx and in the sides of the quarry around the Sphinx. And we can actually trace these blocks back to where they were in the natural rock of the Sphinx.
The first photogrammetric data of the Sphinx are already available. Vasil Dobrev will analyze them. The photographs taken from the air offer a brand new viewpoint that may lead to new information regarding the casing the Sphinx was built in.
We know the Sphinx was carved in a mountain, but it's difficult to imagine because we're always located on the ground. Now, though, we have a view from above, and we can guess what shape the mountain was.
Photogrammetry confirms that the Sphinx has indeed been built from a pile of rocks located on the plateau. But there's something else that is clearly visible on the digital model.
You can see through the photogrammetry that the body of the Sphinx is longer than a normal Egyptian Sphinx. The classic Egyptian Sphinx, they're 3 heads long. And the Great Sphinx of Giza is 5 heads long. So it looks like somebody took the lion body and pulled it too long, like a rubber band. And the reason is there's a huge fissure or a crack in the natural rock that passes right through the waist of the Sphinx. And they couldn't make the back of the rump there because it would just break. So they basically pulled the Sphinx longer to fit it into the geology. And you can see that in the photogrammetry. So that's kind of cool.
This curious crack was discovered when the statue was unearthed. Because of it, the builders had to extend the body of the Sphinx. Otherwise, keeping the regular proportions of a lion would have made it impossible to complete the back of the rump. Fortunately, the builders quickly came up with a solution.
Then the architect filled that gap with stones. And after that, they did the covering stones that you see to support the deteriorated body. And they made the modeling of the lion body above the covering stones.
Although we know much more today about the construction of the most famous Egyptian statue, the Sphinx is still shrouded in mystery. For years, Egyptologists have been debating about who it represents, the famous pharaoh Khufu or his son, Khafre. For a long time, everyone thought it was Khafre, since the Sphinx is located right in front of his pyramid.
The quarry in which the Sphinx sits is the embankment for Khafre's causeway. The Sphinx sits to the left of the end of Khafre's causeway where it meets his valley temple. In front of the Sphinx, there is a Sphinx temple. Obviously, I think, for the Sphinx. So the Sphinx seems to be an integral part of what we could call Khafre's valley complex. And I think it probably represents Khafre.
But other Egyptologists, such as Vasil Dobrev, have other arguments.
When we come to have a look at the Sphinx, we usually arrive from Cairo over there to the east, and so we see the face of the Sphinx and behind Khafre's pyramid. So we think that the Sphinx is Khafre. However, if we put ourselves in the shoes of the Egyptians at that time, they came from the south, from Saqqara, 20 kilometers from here. And when we arrive from there, we see the Sphinx from the side. And who's behind? Khufu. And so we should link the Sphinx to Khufu's pyramid.
Vasil Dobrev believes the Sphinx is connected to Khufu's pyramid and not Khafre's. And to support his theory, he uses photogrammetry.
Photogrammetry is very useful to understand exactly how the Sphinx is placed in regard to Khafre's pyramid. And that's how we see that Khafre's access way goes around the Sphinx. It's very clear here. There can't be any doubts. And so this image makes me certain that when Khafre built his pyramid and the access way, the Sphinx was already there, and he was forced to go around it from the south.
The Pyramid of Khafre was built after Khufu's. So if the access way goes around the Sphinx, Vasil Dobrev concludes that the construction of the Sphinx took place before Khafre's reign, linking it logically to Khufu. But other Egyptologists, such as Mark Lehner, refute this theory.
But why would Khufu make a Sphinx way over there, far away from his pyramid complex and its alignment? His pyramid, temple, and a causeway that was almost 800 meters long actually goes and turns to end at a valley temple some distance away from the Sphinx. The Sphinx, where it is, doesn't make any sense in terms of Khufu's architecture. It does make sense in terms of Khafre's architecture.
For now, the Sphinx identity remains a mystery, but Technologies 2.0 uncover every day more information. Yet scientists have already succeeded in unveiling some secrets of the Sphinx. For years, Zahi Hawass has looked for secret chambers. Together with Mark Lehner, they even dug a tunnel to explore what's under the statue. Today, he agrees to show us this secret passage.
Maybe 5 people who were able to enter inside this tunnel. Only 5. I see a tunnel goes inside here, goes up and down. I want people who talks about the mystery of the Sphinx, and they have a speculation about the Sphinx, to come and see me inside this tunnel, to prove it's a solid rock, the Sphinx. It's a living rock.
32 drilling operations have been carried out around the Sphinx, and none gave any results.
Nothing is hidden underneath at all. No aliens, no people came from Atlantis or lost civilization.
Although the drillings didn't lead to any secret chambers under the statue, they did reveal how fragile the work was. Indeed, the pyramids nearby seem to stand the test of time without major problems. But the Sphinx is much more vulnerable. Because the rocks it is made of are located much below the pyramids, it's also closer to the water table.
The body of the Sphinx itself was once the bed of a seafloor, and so the Sphinx too has all these salts within it. So when groundwater moisture wicks up through the pores of the limestone, it dissolves the salts and it carries them to the surface. When the water dries, the salts recrystallize and they push the surface of the stone off with great pressure. So that's why these softer layers are continuously flaking. That's why the body of the Sphinx is so vulnerable, because it's made out of these very same natural layers. So the advantages to the pyramid builders of this natural geology now become challenges for conserving the monuments.
Renovations of the Sphinx started barely 1,200 years after its construction and have been going on ever since. Today, keeping it in good condition remains a major challenge.
Cracks happened here a few months ago. It proves that the Sphinx is the oldest sick person on Earth, and we need to be near him all the time. I feel that the Sphinx is the icon, not for the Egyptians, but for the whole world. It's very important that we have to save the Sphinx.
The most famous statue in the world is constantly monitored. And thanks to photogrammetry, we can keep a digital copy of the monument forever.
No archaeological site is eternal, and the image we have today is different from what we'll see tomorrow. So this allows us to transfer the image of the monument to another platform, a digital one, and to hand it down to the next generation so they can see it as we do.
Back in Paris, the engineers have completed the calculations for the last photogrammetric data. With the models of the Khafre and Menkaure pyramids now complete, the whole Giza plateau has been reconstructed. And the images are spectacular. Our experts discover them with excitement.
What's amazing with photogrammetry is that it really feels like having a realistic image of the site, and we can move around. It's like having Giza on the computer.
To see the three pyramids in one line and the perfection that the architects did the layout of the three pyramids are amazing. I think I haven't seen the Giza pyramids like this.
Pretty soon, they are able to come up with some conclusions, especially regarding Khafre, the second great pyramid of Giza.
What's striking is how aligned the pyramids are. It's very obvious that Khafre placed his pyramid in the diagonal axis of Khufu. They're aligned along the southeast angle, and this axis goes to Heliopolis.
At the time, Heliopolis was the religious capital of Egypt. Without our modern technologies, Khafre's builders still managed to align his pyramid with Khufu's and the axis of Heliopolis. But when studying Khafre even further, thanks to photogrammetry, Frank Monnier confirms another key element.
Khufu's pyramid is known to be the tallest pyramid ever built. But with this tool, we can do some measurements, and they show us that at the moment, Khafre's is the highest. It kept part of its casing around the top, whereas the top of Khufu's pyramid has been deconstructed. If we measure like this, we realize that Khafre's pyramid is around 140 meters high, while Khufu's is about 138 meters high, which means that Khafre's pyramid is currently the world's tallest pyramid.
Khafre was Khufu's second son. Initially, his pyramid was 143 meters high, and Khufu's was 146 meters high. But because Khufu's pyramid lost its tip because of pillagers, today the son's pyramid is taller than his father's. Despite this feat, though, we don't know much about Khafre's personality.
Khafre must have had big ambitions because he built a big pyramid.
There was a mountain standing there, so he used materials from there, which makes him a practical man.
One thing's certain, Khafre intends to build a pyramid that is as big as his father's. And to get there, practical as he seemed to be, he uses a very smart trick.
When zooming in on the northwest corner of the pyramid, near its base, we clearly see that the stone was carved and that the Egyptians began working with an existing rock bed to save on transporting the building materials. It means that here, they cut off big chunks that were moved somewhere else, where the stone was missing, where they didn't have this rock bed.
In the field, Vasil Dobrev will show us this unique aspect of the pyramid of Khafre.
The mountain is here. We can see it clearly. It was carved to be able to support the blocks. We can pile up blocks on top of it.
Thanks to this rock bed, the pyramid is slightly higher. But this isn't the only trick used by Khafre to make his pyramid look taller.
Since he wanted to build something as high as his father, he cheated a bit and used a slightly steeper slope than his father did.
The sides of Khafre have a 53-degree angle compared to 51 degrees for Khufu. It may seem like a small difference, but steeper slopes like these give Khafre a more gracious aspect compared to Khufu. And this isn't the only feat. The base of the pyramid, too, is a true masterpiece of geometry with perfect proportions.
Photogrammetry gives us a clear view from above. If we trace lines following the pyramid's edges, we notice that they cross each other perfectly at the top, and they follow the edges closely. So truly, the pyramid's geometry is almost perfect.
A couple of mouse clicks are enough to confirm, thanks to photogrammetry, that the base of the Pyramid of Khafre is a perfect square. But how could such accuracy be possible? Scientists believe the answer may lie in the mysterious holes that can be seen in some places of the Giza plateau.
Everywhere in Giza, we found that these holes are 40 centimeters in diameter. The reason for the construction of these holes is to make an accurate square base for the pyramid.
The hypothesis goes like this. Egyptians installed wooden poles in the holes. Thanks to these, they were able to draw semicircles. Then, by drawing a line between the connecting points of the circles, they could draw a perpendicular line and therefore the pyramid's right angle.
Today, we use satellite, we use technology to do it. But the ancient Egyptians found a very simple way to do it, the holes.
This simple but clever technique let builders reach an incredible level of accuracy.
Each side measures 215 meters with an average variation of 8 centimeters, which is unbelievable. The right angles are almost perfect too, as perfect as Khufu's.
Taking a tour around the pyramid thanks to photogrammetry, Frank Monnier discovers another distinctive characteristic in the construction.
Near the base, we notice the presence of huge blocks, megaliths. They're 5 meters long. The blocks in the pyramid of Khufu don't weigh more than 7 tons. But in the pyramid of Khafre, blocks of 20, 30, and even 50 tons are quite common. So there's a clear evolution of the masonry, of the technique used.
Photogrammetry also lets us study how the blocks are laid on the upper part of the pyramid, which is very difficult to reach in the field.
It looks like the masonry is random. We have small blocks, big blocks, without any logic.
It's almost like rubble in places until you get to the top, and the courses look fairly stepped underneath the intact casing. Are they two different phases? Was there an interruption in the work? We don't understand the internal structure of Khafre's pyramid, but by and large, he's not doing masonry as big and as well joined as we see in Khufu.
Vasil Dobrev believes this to be yet another of Khafre's tricks to save time.
I love Khafre because he was a very smart and practical person. When looking at Khufu, everything is clean, straight. The blocks are more or less the same height, but here we can see 3 layers of big stones in order to support the building, of course. But after that, there are smaller stones, bigger stones, not really straight or even, and they discovered that it's much faster. And no one would ever know, since the beautiful casing would hide it all. It's a bit like as if Khufu was real leather and Khafre was leatherette. It's done quickly and efficiently, and looks the same.
Khafre's practical mind seems limitless. Even the very location of his pyramid is a strategic choice.
If we look at the northwest corner, the aerial view clearly shows the traces of a quarry that must have been used during Khafre's reign. This quarry was known, but here we clearly see how the blocks were placed. We can see the furrows carved to detach the stone from the ground.
By taking their supplies right next to the pyramid, the builders killed 2 birds with 1 stone. They decreased the time needed to transport material while doing the excavation work required all around the pyramid. Vasil Dobrev will show us this quarry, located a mere 20 meters from the side of the pyramid.
Here we're at the heart of the mountain Khafre used to build his pyramid. And here we see the part that hasn't been used. But everything else was taken and placed on the monument. We often wonder how long it took to build this, but the stone is right here. And we can even see the marks left by the tools of the workers, how they carved, how they took blocks of different sizes.
Khafre's exterior seems as complex as Khufu's. But what about its interior? The Great Pyramid of Giza has a complex funeral system of 3 chambers. Has Khafre, the little sister, a similar installation? In order to find this out, we received a special authorization to go inside the pyramid.
The pyramid is usually closed to the public, but we got a special authorization. We're really lucky.
For the very first time, our team will be able to digitalize Khafre's interior.
Even though it's all dark inside, we have tools that give us usable data and allow us to create very good quality 3D models.
Khafre's main entrance is located at ground level. It leads to a corridor that goes down, called the Descending Passage, and then to a 60-meter-long corridor. At the end of this passage lies the first burial chamber.
We're in the chamber. It's gorgeous. And again, you see, it's carved directly into the mountain and covered by beautiful stones.
Khafre's burial chamber is 32 square meters. It's much bigger than the king's burial chamber inside Khufu. It's located under the pyramid and was allegedly carved directly in the mountain, in the open. Thanks to photogrammetry, Frank Meunier is able to study its peculiar architecture from a distance. The chamber's vault looks like a reversed V, also known as a chevron vault.
The chamber is in the ground, but it's protected from the weight of the pyramid thanks to this chevron vault. We can see it here. This vault is the most heavily loaded vault in the world. It's inside a masonry of grouted stones. No less than 140 meters of masonry are piled up on top of this vault. It's a lot. This is probably a record in the world history of construction.
140 meters of masonry, hundreds of tons of stones held by this incredible vault. Khufu's architects were the first to use chevrons inside a pyramid. Thanks to these experiments, Khafre's engineers mastered the technique. Here, the vault bears the entire weight of the pyramid.
The ceiling is made of big blocks, placed like chevrons. This placement means that the weight is carried where there's support, not where it's empty. This technique is so effective that every kind afterwards will use it.
The loads are spread on the sides. They're moved away from the center towards the side walls. Flat ceiling instead, the loads would bear down on it. It would break and collapse.
The vault of Khafre's burial chamber is a true construction feat. Indeed, it still looks almost as new 4,500 years later.
We can see small cracks, so although the vault is in an excellent shape indeed, it has still been worn out by an incredible load. Hundreds of thousands of tons rest on it. It had an impact. So although it's in a very good shape, it's still cracked. This is something very difficult to see with the naked eye, but obvious on the photogrammetry.
There's another curious element among Khafre's funeral complex. His sarcophagus brings up many questions.
The sarcophagus actually was made of red granite. And red granite came from Aswan. And you have to know there is two things here that we have to think. Either the ancient Egyptian architect ordered the workmen to do it in the granite quarry in Aswan, then they can make the lid separate and they can make the sarcophagus separate. Or they brought the pieces to make it here.
Was Khafre's sarcophagus made on the spot or brought from Aswan?
I really think that they made it in Aswan, because if they bring the pieces here and any mistake can happen, then it will be useless. Look at the size of this. It exactly can fit with the size of the entrance.
The fact Khafre strives to such perfection for his tomb is due to it having only a single chamber, unlike his father, who had created a complex funeral system with several chambers. Some Egyptologists believe such simplicity to be the result of the pharaoh's practical mind.
This is the main idea here. Let's do what's absolutely necessary to be able to bury the king if he dies, so he can be resurrected.
Was Khafre simply playing it safe? Or did he want to differentiate himself from his father? No technology or any other clue can currently answer this question. But the obvious simplicity of the construction is a source of questions for scientists.
We often looked for other burial chambers inside Khafre because we thought it was much too simplistic.
One day, perhaps, new technologies will allow us to go even further and to uncover Khafre's final secrets. But in order to discover the last treasure of Giza, we have to go around Khafre. Indeed, the last pyramid, that of his son Menkaure, is much smaller than the others on the plateau. It's only 63 meters high.
It's about 2.5 times shorter than the pyramid of Khufu. Why did we go from extreme gigantism to a human scale?
Could be they're running out of space on the Giza plateau because the pyramids are built on this diagonal, and Menkaure's pyramid is very close to the southern edge of the plateau. It's not a steep drop, but there's a wadi there, and there's not a lot of room for a gigantic pyramid.
But such change could also be explained by politics.
If you look at the statues of Menkaure, look at his face. Khufu and Khafre, strong kingship, strong kings, but began for the first time to see a kind man, a man who's a nice guy, and he's now accompanying goddess and goddesses and touching their hand. Then he's different.
So I get the feeling with Menkaure that they're running out of steam. Things are slowing down. You just get the impression that nobody's really supervising, funds are running out, and yeah, that the whole process is just losing steam, and they're getting tired.
Whatever the reasons explaining Menkaure's small size, Vasil Dobrev believes that what matters is that the last pyramid of Giza is a mixture of techniques, even though it was built almost a century after Khafre's.
We sometimes hear that Menkaure built a small pyramid because they didn't know how to build anymore. The techniques had been lost. But right here, inside his funeral temple, there's the biggest carved stone on Giza. Here, some blocks weigh about 200 tons. It means the techniques were still known, but this idea was different.
And here again, the extreme accuracy of photogrammetry will perhaps help us to better understand how Menkaure's pyramid was built.
When zooming in on Menkaure, the first thing that catches my eye is the quarry located near the northwest corner. The quarry has been mentioned very seldom and never described, but photogrammetry will allow us to create a very detailed plan of the blocks they carved here. We can still see the furrows used to detach the construction stones. We can see that the blocks were rather big, something like 3 meters by 3. They could weigh more than 10 tons each, 20 even perhaps.
Here too, the builders from antiquity used materials available nearby so they wouldn't have to carry them over long distances. But this strategy doesn't work for every stone in the pyramid. Indeed, Menkaure made some aesthetic choices that are in sharp contrast to his ancestors.
One of the characteristics of Menkaure is that he encased his pyramid in granite. It's much harder than limestone and protects better. We know that everything that holds in a pyramid is made of granite. So here, the whole casing is in granite. But did he ever reach the top? Not sure. Unfortunately, he didn't have time to finish. The poor man didn't reign as long as Khufu or Khafre, and so he couldn't complete the outer casing of his pyramid.
Every king wants a new trend for himself. Then maybe Menkaure thought that I have to make something different than casing my pyramid with limestone. Every dynasty has a trend, something new.
The first 16 layers of Menkaure are made of granite. This is the only pharaoh on the Giza plateau who used so much of this rock. Egyptologists think that the rest of the pyramid was limestone. Granite is much more difficult to carve and takes much more time. Menkaure took the risk with this decision that his tomb wouldn't be ready by the time he died.
One of the last tasks that remained undone was to smooth the bottom of the pyramid in granite. So the workers walked away from the job, leaving the outer faces of each casing block in granite with this big belly of extra stone. All of that was meant to be cut away, actually hammered away with heavy hammer stones, and work just stopped. But it left us a kind of frozen moment in one of the processes of building pyramids.
Frank Monnier is in Paris, and he continues to analyze the photogrammetric data of the last pyramid of Giza. He notices something unusual about how the sides of Menkaure were built. They seem slightly curved inwards.
When we do a horizontal cross-section, we notice that all four sides seem concave. Now, if I move the cross-section from bottom to top, we see that this is not even. At the very bottom, we don't notice any bend. But as we go upwards, the bend becomes more and more obvious.
The accuracy of the images lets us see something very difficult to perceive with the naked eye. Namely, that the sides of the pyramids are slightly bent inwards, but our expert believes that it has nothing to do with the construction.
There's a theory saying that there was a deliberate intent by the builders to create a pyramid like this, meaning a pyramid with 8 sides instead of 4. It's a theory. Now, during the Middle Ages, quarry workers used blocks from the casings of the Giza pyramids. They removed them and let them slide down the sides of the building so they could be used in building Cairo. So the process of detaching the blocks and letting them slide down may have also damaged the pyramid.
This series of blocks being detached from the top may have ended up causing furrows on the sides of the pyramids. Also, during the Middle Ages, the Sultan, Osman Bey, ordered the digging of the famous split on the north side, hoping to discover the entrance to the pyramid. But it's not before the 19th century that the real entrance will be discovered by an English explorer. It's located much below, less than 4 meters above the ground. It leads to a narrow corridor that goes down to a first chamber.
It's decorated with false door motifs. The door doesn't really open. And this is the first time you have decoration inside and under the pyramid since the time of Djoser. Just beyond this, you have a portcullis slab that, boom, is lowered down in a slot, and that would have closed the pyramid. That would have been the second line of defense. The first line of defense presumably would have been the outer casing and the plugging of the passageway.
Menkaure copied the security system used by Khufu for his burial chamber. A portcullis brought down by pulleys. Beyond this system lies another horizontal corridor leading to another room, much bigger this time.
So we come at the end of a horizontal passage to this rather spacious rectangular room cut completely out of the natural rock. And many think this is the first burial chamber of Menkaure. And, you know, it's compelling that that's the case. Now, there's a second burial chamber at the bottom of a second sloping passage. But people think this is the original burial chamber because there's a socket at the western end of the chamber in a kind of niche, just right for a sarcophagus.
This is Menkaure's distinctive characteristic. The funeral system has nothing in common with the classic model of Khafre. Quite the opposite, actually. It's very advanced. To better understand how it all fits together, images from photogrammetry prove very useful.
When we're inside, we have no idea of the dimensions or how everything is organized. But here, a quick glance is enough to understand. Here's the descending passage, the first chambers, and the various rooms leading to the vault. These images will help us study how the various rooms are organized, because they're quite far away from each other.
The ensemble of burial chambers and passageways do get simpler through time. But here they're still experimenting. They're changing their minds still. They seem to have decided on a second burial chamber in granite. Yeah, the photogrammetry captures that complexity.
Yet what's most disturbing for Egyptologists in Menkaure's funeral system is that no sarcophagus has been found in the first major burial chamber, despite the fact everything seemed to have been prepared for it.
It's very compelling that this is a socket for a sarcophagus. It's just the right size. And here, the corner is cut away, and this is a lever socket, so that they probably, with a big wooden lever, kept the sarcophagus a little bit up so they could adjust it. And then only when they had it in its perfect position could they let the lever down and boom, lower the sarcophagus into this socket. Yes, it looks like they did all the preparations for the sarcophagus, and yet they changed their mind. Somebody changed their mind, maybe the king, because they prepared yet another chamber further to the west.
And so the builders of the pyramid prepared a space for a sarcophagus before giving it up. But Vasil Dobrev doesn't believe in a change of plan. Rather, he thinks this is a trick.
Menkaure is trying to deceive. He created some kind of chamber in the beginning, which is supposed to be the burial chamber. And it's locked, just like a real burial chamber. During Menkaure's time, pyramids had been desecrated already, and we found items that should have been in Khufu's burial chamber inside Menkaure's chamber. There was Khufu's name on them. So we clearly see how Menkaure is trying to trick thieves into believing that this is the burial chamber, while the real deal lies beyond. Did it work? That remains to be seen.
The real burial chamber of Menkaure, the one that should have sheltered the embalmed body of the pharaoh, should therefore be located at the end of the long corridor going down from the first chamber. Mark Lehner is leading us there.
So the final burial chamber, where Menkaure was probably laid to rest, is this beautifully polished, at one time polished, granite chamber at the end of the passage system.
In order to build the 17 square meter chamber in granite, the builders probably carved the stones directly on the spot.
It's clear that they finished the room after they put the blocks in place. They put the blocks in place with the outer faces rough and unsmooth, and then they literally sculpted the room out of the rough granite. That's why you get about 1 centimeter of this stone turning the corner, or 1 centimeter of this stone turning the corner.
But against all odds, there's currently no tomb in this chamber. However, when explorers first came in during the 19th century, there was indeed a sarcophagus.
What's important is that a sarcophagus was discovered during the 19th century and taken away by the explorers. They decided discreetly to take it out of the pyramid and bring it to England. Unfortunately, the boat carrying them back to England sank, and the sarcophagus disappeared in the Mediterranean Sea.
Before losing it, explorers had been able to look inside the sarcophagus. It was empty. But a closer analysis could perhaps have shed some light on the mysteries of the pyramids. Today, despite tremendous progress due to promising technologies such as photogrammetry, many secrets are left unsolved on the Giza Plateau, one of Egypt's most studied sites.
The coming years will reveal many more discoveries because the Giza Plateau hasn't told us everything yet. There are many mysteries left, things to discover, and so we hope that the current research and the research of the future will bring us new elements to help us understand how the Great Pyramids were built.
Although others believe that the mysteries surrounding the pyramids are precisely what has been fascinating people for more than 4,500 years.
When I take a group of people in front of the Sphinx, I could see in their eyes how they looked at it with mystery. They don't like even to know the truth. They like the mystery to continue.
Some Egyptologists believe that hundreds of years will be necessary to uncover all of Egypt's treasures. Digital methods could perhaps speed up an investigation that has been going on for centuries.